for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
Play it on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
Giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
S-I-C-K, it's the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K, 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 S-I-C-K,
All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
S-I-C-K, it's the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
Play it on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
Giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
S-I-C-K, it's the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K, 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 S-I-C-K.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. With Tony Marinaro.
55 seconds left in the penalty, a minute and 27 seconds left in regulation time. Boston 4, Montreal 3. Lafleur coming out rather gingerly on the right side. He gives it into Lemaire, back to Lafleur. Oh!
The sickest Montreal Canadiens podcast.
You're in the ball!
Sports entertainment like no other.
Rejoint, on lui fait perdre la rondelle, une passe devant. Et c'est le dégagement et ce sera la victoire des Canadiens. Coupe Stanley pour les Canadiens. Le 23e de l'histoire.
You found the dogs! John, you found the dogs! He found the dogs! And all together, they worked a young team to the top. And now, a 24th Stanley Cup banner will hang from the rafters of the famous Forum in Montreal. The Canadiens win the Stanley Cup!
Brought to you by Energy Transportation Group. Driven to be different. La Tibi. It's gonna be sick.
That's right. I, the Hebrew Hammer, Matt Ohayon, am back. I took a couple weeks off for some bachelor parties, some family engagements, but I am back. Don't worry about it. I am here to bring you your Tuesday version of the Sick Podcast. Tony needed the night off, so he's done me enough favors, so I very much obliged this morning, even though he texted me last night. All right. The Sick Podcast is brought to you by Energy Transportation Group, who has recently been named by Deloitte and CIBC as one of Canada's best managed companies, the country's leading business award recognizing innovative and world-class companies. The best managed Canadian companies designation fuels Energy's purpose of creating progress for our customers, our employees, and our communities. Join a winning team and check out Energy's career page for available opportunities. Also brought to you by La Bittt at Tibi, brewed in Quebec and a winner of a dozen international awards. La Bittt at Tibi offers quality microbrewery beers made with premium ingredients for everyone's taste. La Bittt at Tibi. Embrace your true nature. And of course, by XL Moto, they are the premier motorcycle and scooter dealership in Montreal for over 20 years. Our dealership carries 7 different motorcycle and scooter brands. We are number 1 Aprilia and Piaggio ambassadors for the last 5 years. XL Moto, your ultimate destination and best customer service experience. All right, let's get to it. We got an NHL game going on right now. It's not much of a game as the Vegas Golden Knights are up 4-0 in the second intermission on the Dallas Stars. The Dallas Stars fans, if you haven't seen, they were throwing things on the ice before the end of the second period. So the refs decided to call the period early with about 20 or so seconds. So not much to talk about there, but we will get to the rest of the NHL playoffs after we talk Habs with our Habs Roundtable guest. First, I will introduce him. He is from Dans les coulisses and BPM Sport. His name is Charles-Alexis Brisebois. Charles, how are we doing?
Hi, I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm well rested. I got a lot of sleep over the past 3 weeks. Tony's been cutting into my sleep time every Friday night, working this podcast Friday night. So I'm feeling good. And we will introduce our next guest now. He is from Habs Eyes on the Prize. His name shares a pretty good first name with me, Matt Drake. Matt, how we doing?
I'm doing terrific. It's a good day to be a Matt, It's always a good day to be a Matt.
It's always a good day. Exactly. Just full disclosure before we jump into it. Okay, I love scaring the crap out of Sammy and Agnello every episode. So just going to pull back the curtain here a little bit. This backdrop behind me, I put it up. I'm not a very good handyman. It's being hung by duct tape. Now, every so often, and this thing weighs a ton. Like you wouldn't believe how heavy this thing is. Every so often, when I get home from the work or being out on the town at night, this backdrop I find folded over my desk, crushing my laptop and whatever else is on my desk. So there is a very, very small chance that this thing will crash on me during the show, which would make for a great clip and for good laughs. And a stressful situation for me. Who doesn't like laughing at a stressed out me? I know Sammy and Agnello do, so no worries there. All right, now that that's out of the way, let's start off with the Habs because frankly, these NHL conference finals have just been Very uninteresting for the most part in terms of results, because both of them are, well, one of them is about to be 3-0 and the other one is 3-0. So obviously it's draft season, so we're going to start there as we usually do. So I've been seeing a lot on Twitter, and I know Twitter doesn't really reflect the real world, but I've been seeing a lot on Twitter, people like kind of freaking out about what the Habs are going to do with the 5th overall pick. A lot of people are saying they're going to take Dalibor Dvorsky or David Reinbacher, who's supposed to be the best defenseman in the draft. But the problem with being the best defenseman in the draft, drafting the best defenseman in the draft, I should say, is that this is supposedly the most offensively talented draft at the top end of it in the past God knows how many years. So would you, I'm going to tell you they're going to take one of Dvorsky or Reinbacher, do you think that they're better off trading the pick? We'll start with Matt.
I'm hard to say if they're better off trading the pick or not. I mean, Reinbacher, we're hearing a lot of comparisons to Moritz Seider, and if that's the case, if that's for real, if he really is the next coming of Moritz Seider, then they're better off making the pick than they are trading it, because you don't often get defensemen like that, and they could really use a defenseman like that. Dvorsky, I'm just not sold. I think if they were going to go in that route with the 5th overall pick, I would trade down and hope that he comes to you a little bit later in the draft. He's maybe able to stack some extra capital and still get the player that you're looking for. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. If they're doing Reinbacher, they better be sure that he's the second coming of Moritz Seider, because if he's not and you use the 5th overall pick on him, you're going to miss out on a bunch of other players. Maybe Will Smith, maybe Zach Benson, maybe Matvei Michkov, maybe Leo Carlson. We don't know who's going to be available at 5, but we know there's going to be a lot of really offensively talented guys at number 5. I think unless they're 100% sure, and they better be 100% sure that he's the next coming of Moritz Seider, I wouldn't go in that direction. As for Dvorsky, I really think that they could just trade down and get him, because it sounds, from what you're hearing on Twitter and from all of the insiders, so to speak, it doesn't sound like there's any other teams that are that interested in him other than Montreal, if you're listening to the rumors. So, I mean, again, if it's him, I'd trade down. If it's Reinbacher, then I would just pray to the hockey gods that they're 100% sure about him.
Shaw, what do you think?
Yeah, it's gonna be it's a tough spot for Kent Hughes right now, because as we all know, I mean, Connor Bedard's gonna go first, then it's gonna be Fantilli and probably Carlson and Will Smith 3 and 4 or 4 and 3, and then you're gonna probably have to make that decision. Are you taking Mishkov? Because if someone else takes Mishkov, the decision is easy. But right now, it's probably the toughest spot in the draft, considering that I think Mishkov probably is gonna go to Arizona, because they don't fear drafting Russian guys, and they have 2 picks in the first 12. So the Habs, they cannot miss that opportunity for that, and because they don't plan to draft 4th or 5th or 6th the next year, because they want to get better. So it's probably going to be the last huge pick that Kent Hughes and Jeff Gordon are going to make. So as Matt said, you need to be sure about the guy you're going to draft. If you have doubts about any one of them, you need to draft down and to acquire some assets. I don't know if it's a strategy that Kent Hughes wants to use, because it's going to be his second draft. It's not something that Jeff Gordon did in the past in New York, but maybe the opportunity is going to rise in that particular situation. So we're just going to see, but I wouldn't be totally surprised to see them draft them.
Yeah, I'm not too concerned with, because I mean, listen, like last year, who was the David Juracek? He got drafted 5th, 6th, 7th overall, and now people are saying, based off of 1 year, these are still a bunch of 18 and 19-year-old kids, that he's going to be the best player of that draft. So it's so wait and see for me, which is like really the boring answer to the question. But I agree with you. You better be damn sure, because frankly, I think listen, if scouting projections are right from even before the Canadiens drafted Juraj Slafkovsky, and that, he's just going to end up being, a 60-point guy, which you can't complain about. But at first overall, you kind of could complain about that. They're damn lucky that they got Lane Hudson in the second round. Now, I don't know who else the Canadiens have their eyes on, but, if I'm telling you that if we're going to play the what if game now, like if the Canadiens drafted Slafkovsky, he becomes a 60-point player, which are for the most part a dime a dozen. and they don't end up with Lane Hudson, that is an incredible failure of a draft by Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton. So I'm with you guys. You got to be damn sure about these things, but it's tough because, as people on the outside, we're not scouts. We're not watching every single second. We're going off by what other people are saying. So I don't know. It's stressful times, but let's say Michkov is there. Are you guys on the Michkov train? Are you off the Michkov train? Shal, let's start with you. I know a lot of people are concerned with his situation.
It's hard to say, obviously, because we don't have all the facts, and there's probably one information or two that is very crucial that we don't know right now. So just based on talent, obviously, you got to draft the guy. I'm not sure about the rest, and I'm not stressed, by the way, with the contract itself, because a lot of those prospects are gonna wait 1, 2, 3, 4 years before coming to the NHL. So I'm not stressed by that. But you don't know exactly what's going on in Russia right now, so that could scare some people. And the fact that the Florida Panthers are so great in the playoffs and we're not drafting number 17 right now, I think it puts more pressure on pick number 5. I think if Kent Hughes has that 17 pick, maybe he could consider Michkov a little bit more, saying we have a safety net at number 17. Right now, the safety net is probably going to be 31, and it's probably going to be 32, in fact, because those Panthers looks really great. So I don't know if I would draft Michkov right now. I don't have all the information, as I said, but as of right now, I probably lean till no, but I'm not sure.
Matt?
I'll go the other way. I'll say, you know what? I would take him. I'd have no problem taking him. I think the Habs can afford to wait, right? The situation in Russia is something that I don't think anybody in the hockey world has a full grasp on. Nobody's too sure what's happening over there. Are players going to be able to come over? But we do know, I've heard that he's going to be at the draft, for example. So obviously that, combined with the fact that he's mentioned in the past that he would be open to signing a contract in the NHL, once his contract's done in the KHL, that's when the Habs are going to be getting towards, the possibility of being contenders anyways. So why not, considering that he's almost universally agreed to be the number 2 player in this draft behind Connor Bedard in terms of ceiling, why not make that bet? I think Kent Hughes, after last year's draft, again, too early to really call it and say Uri Slafkovsky's a bust. He's still got plenty of time to develop. But after the way that went, the fact that they obviously were 1 year late in terms of getting the first overall pick and getting a generational player, I think they can afford to take a swing, and they can afford to wait a few years for him to actually come over, because that's when they're going to be ready to compete anyways. So I think, personally, I've been beating the drum for Zach Benson since way earlier in the year. As soon as they got right around that 5th last area, that's the kind of the guy that I've been wanting. But if they went Matvei Michkov, I'd have no issue with it. I think they can afford to wait. And I think taking a swing on potentially a generational type player, a guy who is universally considered to be the number 2 and behind Connor Bedard in terms of sheer talent, I don't have a problem with that. And I'd be happy to sit back and wait a couple of years for him to come over. And then you get another Kirill Kaprizov situation in Montreal this time, where, the guy drops further than he should have in the draft. And then once he comes over, you got a guy who's probably over a point per game as long as he develops well.
Well, that's the thing that I was thinking about with all this Michkov stuff was Kirill Kaprizov, because he comes in as a rookie at how old was he in his rookie year? 24, 23, something like that. Yeah, and he just comes 25 in and throwing up 80 points. He sneezed and he had 80 points in the NHL. So I agree with you. I think the Habs could afford to wait. But I also agree with Charles, your first point that you made on the night, which is, this should be the last highest pick, or the highest pick that Kent Hughes should be making the rest of his tenure in Montreal, because I'm assuming the goal for next year is to be at the very least a 500 team. Based off of how this year went, considering all the injuries that happened and all that. So I think they could afford to take that swing. And it's one that, it's tough. You look back on it in 5 years from now, say, Michkov gives the middle finger to North America and says, I want to stay in Russia. Who knows what opinions are going to be then. But, we know now that in this moment that it makes so much sense I mean, it makes sense to not take him. It makes sense to take him. It depends how risk averse you want to be. But I think Kent Hughes has proven, especially last year at the draft, his first draft in Montreal, when he traded Romanov for that pick, and then turned that pick into Doc. I think he's proven that he can take a swing if it's calculated enough, and I'm sure they've been doing their homework on Michkov. All right, this is where it's going to get a little weird. We're only 15 minutes in. It's going to get weird. But bear with me because, I mean, listen, right? Like there's been no news. There's been no news. Nothing. Not a sliver of news out of the Canadiens camp recently. So we're just gonna have some fun here. And I'm gonna throw out some things that I'm gonna get demolished for in the comments, and that's gonna be life. So let's start. It's gonna come full circle. We're not getting weird yet. Cole Caufield. His contract, a lot of people are thinking, oh, this is going to be easy. They set an internal cap with Nick Suzuki, and that this is going to be, a simple deal to wrap up. Well, not so much, because a lot of people thought at the post-mortem, that's where they were going to announce it. The draft lottery would have been a perfect time to announce it after the Canadiens got 5th overall. Lots of good timing to do that, and not so much anymore. So are either of you getting worried with the Caufield contract situation?
No, I'm not. I'm not worried about what's going on right now because we're in May. The playoffs are not even done. The draft is not behind us. The free agency is not behind. His contract is not up first. So, even if it happens in July or in August, it's not going to be the end of the world. That being said, I understand why there is this sense of urgency because, Cole Caufield is really, really, really loved in Montreal. And the expectations were that he was going to sign during the season. And the fact that his season ended in January made sure that we could start to negotiate right now because he's not going to score more or he's not going to do anything more. But it's not. Kent Hughes has a lot of things to think about right now. It's the same thing for Pat Brisson, which is his agent. So no, I'm not worried for now. I think it's gonna happen when it's gonna happen. I still think it's gonna be a long-term deal. I think he wants to be and he likes to be in Montreal. So for now, I'm not stressed. Maybe if you ask the same question 10 days before the next training camp, my answer could be different. But as of right now, as of end of May, I'm not stressed.
Yeah, I'm not worried either. They're going to get that deal done. The only question at this point is somebody going to come in and try to offer sheet him? I've seen rumors out there that the Flyers are interested in offer sheeting him and correcting that mistake that they made back at the draft when they took Cam York over him. But look, barring that, I don't see a situation where Cole Caufield's not back with a new contract next year. I think really the question is how long is the term going to be? I think most thinking is that you chain him to Nick Suzuki, you sign him to a 7-year deal. He gets the benefit of getting to free agency a little bit quicker in that scenario, and then he can renegotiate a new deal at that point based on what he's accomplished over the course of that deal. But there's also the possibility, of course, of just signing him to an 8-year deal, the max that you're able to offer him. I think a lot of the concern is just the fact that it hasn't happened yet. And realistically, you have to consider the fact that he was hurt for most of the season. You're not going to be signing a contract while he's in the middle of rehabbing that injury, which he was working on for almost half the year. So I think this is one where if he hadn't gotten hurt, he probably would have signed it. I would have expected before the end of the season. But because he got hurt, that delayed the process a little bit. And as Charles-Alexis mentioned, they have a lot of other things going on right now. So I'd expect it to get done probably sometime just after the draft.
Yeah, so you mentioned the reason, Matt, why I'm starting to sweat a little bit is just because of the offer sheet thing. He has to sign that offer sheet, just like Sebastian Aho had to sign that offer sheet deal from the Canadiens way back when. But still, that's the part that scares me because, like the Flyers, they've been dying for a goal scorer forever. And, there's one that they could probably just throw a bunch of money at and then throw the Canadiens' plans for a loop. It's the only reason why I'm starting to sweat. I'm dealing with a contract negotiation with my other favorite team in the Cincinnati Bengals and Joe Burrow. He was asked about it. And I find interesting, actually. I'm interested to get your guys' take on it. So he's obviously going to be making $1 bajillion once he signs his contract. But he said to the media, he's involved a little bit. That's all. That's the little nugget he said, because he said, I know what needs to be done because I want to keep a core of a team together. If Caufield were to come out and say something like that, this goes against all that hockey players stand for in being transparent. But, if he were to come out and say that, would that make you feel even better?
I'd love to hear something. And I think if you were to say something along those lines, it would make me feel better about the concept that maybe he'd be taking a team-friendly deal. But I do think like there's a certain limit that the Habs are going to go to. I think the Nick Suzuki deal kind of sets a bit of an internal cap, right? I know Caufield is a goal scorer, so there's different considerations for that. He was on pace for over 40 goals this season. Obviously, had he hit that, you have a case there as his agent. If you're Pat Brisson, you could be potentially arguing for a 10 million plus, right? But with that Nick Suzuki deal, it's tough in a negotiation to sit there and say, well, I want 10 million. We know what Nick Suzuki is getting. He's getting under 8. It's hard for you to go that much further over Nick Suzuki just on the fact that you were projected to go over 40 goals. So I think the dollars and cents aren't much of a concern. But if he came out and said something like that, then I'd probably be sitting at home being like, yeah, he's going to take a team friendly. He's going to come in at 6 milli and we're going to have a 40 goal scorer for 6 mil. That's not going to happen, I don't think. But if he said something like that, yeah, now that you mention it, I'd probably be at home, prematurely celebrating the fact that he was going to sign a team friendly.
Probably that everybody would have that same reaction. That being said, I think we need to think about the fact that when you are in a negotiation, everything you say publicly has some goal, right? So Kent Hughes doesn't want to say anything. Marc Bergevin was the same type, and Pat Brisson is an experienced agent. So I think that if Cole Caufield says something, it would be calculated. That being said, it could still be a good news for the Canadiens, because everybody is kind of worried right now. As I said, I don't know why, because it's still early, but it's still. And Matt, I wanted to add about the offer sheet. The thing you have to consider about the Flyers is the fact that Daniel Brière is a brand new GM, and I don't know if he would do such thing when he's brand new. I mean, if you think about an old GM like a David Boyle, I know he's going to retire, but a guy like him, maybe you could have the standard to do something like that. But Brière was arrived in March, and he was confirmed a few weeks ago. So I'm not sure the Flyers would completely do that. But you know what? It's Philadelphia. Maybe it's going to happen. So we never know.
Well, that's it. It's Philadelphia. So, all right, let's we brought up the offer sheet by Philadelphia. Okay, let's start to get weird. The first two things I asked you guys were are the Canadiens better off trading the pick, and about Cole Caufield's contract situation. Things go sour behind closed doors. Nobody knows, because then his value would obviously tank. He doesn't want to sign in Montreal anymore. Are you trading the 5th overall pick and Cole Caufield for 2nd overall in the NHL draft, landing yourself Adam Fantilli? Let's start with Charles-Alexis. I know that's a lot to process, so that's why I'm going to continue talking for like 5 more seconds for you to be able to formulate an answer in your head.
Yeah, that's a hard one. If you would have said number 1, it would have been clear that yes, I would have done it. Number 2, I don't know how good Fantilli is gonna be. I know Caufield will probably be happy to be with his buddy Trevor Zegras. That being said, he looks happy right now in Montreal too with Nick Suzuki. So it's a hard call. I'm not sure I would do it, because I know Fantilli is going to be a hell of a player, but Cole Caufield is a really good goal scorer, and number 5 is going to be a really good player. So I'm not sure that the difference between number 5 and number 2 is worth Cole Caufield. I think the difference between 5 and 1 is worth Cole Caufield, but I'm not sure with 2 it's worth it. You have 2 young players, and I know that Caufield is not going to be paid as a young player because his contract is up, but he's still very, very young. He's going to be with the Habs for a long time. He looks happy in town. He is very essential to that locker room too. And remember when he got injured, the first thing that the guy said is, is not we're gonna have to compensate on the ice. They said we're gonna have to compensate on the fact that he's always happy and he's bringing something in this locker room. So if you trade Cole Caufield and Adam Fantilli is not having a great first season or whatever, the people are really really gonna be unhappy about it. So I don't think I'm doing it.
You're getting you're getting cop cars flipped and set on fire in Montreal if you do that, and it doesn't work out. If it was Bedard every day and twice on Sundays, I make the deal, right? As far as Fantilli is concerned, look, it goes super hypothetical with it. If Caufield came out publicly and said, "I'm not signing in Montreal, it's not happening," bring on the offer sheets or something, and he tried to make it super public, which I don't see that happening. He seems very happy in Montreal. I agree with Charles-Alexis on that front. If that happened, then maybe I'd make the deal just to get some value out of him, considering that he's going to be on his way out anyways. But I think as it stands, with his contract up in the air, and as far as we know, the negotiations are ongoing, I wouldn't make the deal. I think Fantilli is going to be a great player, but as Charles-Alexis mentioned, with number 5 and then Cole Caufield as well, the chemistry that Cole Caufield has with Nick Suzuki, I think that as a package, 5 and Cole Caufield is worth considerably more than going after Adam Fantilli, as good as I think he's going to be.
Yeah, that's just the thing. Again, like I said, I was going to get destroyed in the comments. That's exactly what's happening, which is fantastic. We love that engagement. That's the good stuff. Keep commenting on, how crazy I am. But see, I'm with you guys. I don't think I would have the guts to do it either. But I would kind of understand it if it did happen. You want to talk about massive risk? Yeah, you better be damn sure about Adam Fantilli, because they're pretty damn sure about Cole Caufield is going to be a 40 to 50 goal scorer in his over the course of his career, barring he stays healthy. So let's just move on from that one. I thought it was just let's throw that out there, because there's no news. So maybe no news means he requested a trade. All right. No. So before we move on to the rest of the NHL playoffs, I want to ask you guys again, draft season and, it's prospect season. We've been talking a lot on this podcast, or Tony has, to scouts and asking them his opinion on the prospects that are already in the system. Now, obviously, Lane Hudson is the easy answer, so I'm going to take him out of the equation. Other than Lane Hudson, just give me 1 or 2 prospects that excite you guys the most, that you've been seeing a lot about. Let's start with Matt.
Well, number 1 for me, I've been one of this guy's biggest boosters for a while, Joshua Roy. He had a fantastic season in Sherbrooke, really impressive World Junior Hockey Championship as well. I'm sure everybody saw that. The ridiculous penalty kill shift that he had was honestly my favorite part of that World Junior Championships. And it's not like he scored a goal or anything. He had plenty of points. He was over a point per game at that tournament. On top of that, he has developed his game in every single facet that he needs to in order to become a productive NHL player. When he was drafted, the book on him was this guy can shoot, and that's about it. He had a really good shot, and it drove him down to the 5th round because he had some issues with his skating, issues defensively. He's corrected a lot of that. He's gotten better skating. He's considerably better defensively. He's developed a ridiculous penalty kill ability. Everything that he needs in order to become successful at the next level, because just being able to shoot wasn't going to be enough for him. I really think that once he makes it to the NHL, he's significantly increased his ceiling to the point where, before you might've been talking about a 3rd line ceiling on him, and now he's got legitimate top 6 potential. Again, fantastic season, really impressive playoffs out of him. They lost, unfortunately, to Halifax in the semifinals, but look, he's done everything that I needed to see from him to get more excited about him than I already was. Number 2 behind him, I would honestly have to say Riley Kidney. I'm sticking in the queue. I love my queue guys. Riley Kidney, after he got traded to Gatineau, he went on an ungodly tear. So he almost made the World Junior team. He gets hurt at camp. And then after he got hurt at camp, he goes back to the queue, gets traded, and then just starts murdering everything in that league. I actually got the chance to speak with him when he was here in St. John, playing a game against the Sea Dogs. And I asked him about that. I was like, did you get extra motivation from not making that team? And he said, absolutely. When I didn't make that team, I didn't get the opportunity to play in front of my home fans. He's like, I went back and he's like, it lit a fire inside of me. And I really wanted to prove to everybody what I could do. And he did that and more. He was fantastic for the remainder of that season. I don't necessarily think he's got the same ceiling as a Joshua Roy, but I think he could be a very useful player. I'm super excited to see both of those guys graduate and go to Laval next year. I think they're going to be great performers. I think the Rocket are going to be super fun to watch because both of those guys are going to be on the ice. And outside of Lane Hudson, I'd put both of those guys right up there, pretty close to Lane Hudson in terms of how excited I am to see what they do at the next level.
Go ahead, Charles.
Yeah, you named two really great guys in the queue. Logan Mailloux is gonna be a hell of a defenseman, and if the Habs decided to take a risk with all the conditions that we know, is because the guy is worth it. And we saw him this year, and it was exciting to see him play because he didn't really play that much in the past few years because of the pandemic, because of the suspension, because of an injury, because of everything you can think about. He didn't play, and this year he could really be the quarterback that the Knights needed. He developed defensively, he developed offensively, and he developed also the outside of the ice, obviously. So I'm really excited to see him. I think he's going to start in Laval next year, but who knows if he has a good season. We saw last year that Kent Hughes and Jeff Gordon are not afraid to give the kids the chance to play at the blue line. So I think we can see him in Montreal sooner than later, and he's bringing that the offensive side that we need on the right side, because we know all of the left siders that the Montreal Canadiens have for the future. But on the right side, beside Justin Barron and Logan Mailloux, it's not really that full. So I'm really excited to see him. And Sean Farrell wasn't the best player on the ice, obviously, at the end of the season in Montreal, but he was getting his feet wet in the NHL. I think he could play in Laval next year, or could play in Montreal. I don't know. I think the training camp is going to be really important for him. But, he was a very, very important player in the NCAA in the past 2 years. He played for the USA. He was really, really dominant. He has that skill set that not a lot of players have in the NHL. So if that could translate from NCAA to the pro level, I think he could be a very, very dangerous guy. And I think he is underestimated a little bit because he is small and because he wasn't as exciting as we thought when he came in the NHL. So I think some people got down the horse, but I really think he's going to be good next year.
Yeah,
on Mailloux.
Go ahead.
On Mailloux, real quick. Sorry to cut you off, but on Mailloux, real quick,
no
in case anybody didn't see it, he shoots the puck harder than anybody on the Montreal Canadiens roster right now. I mean, if he came up to the Habs, I guarantee you, do a hardest shot competition, he has the hardest shot. They clocked him at, I think, 104 miles per hour at the London Knights skills competition. This guy has a pro shot. He's got some work to do, but I agree with you 100%. Like, you put him on, if the only thing he had to do was play the power play, and that's it. He didn't have to play 5-on-5 in the NHL. You could put him on the Habs roster tomorrow, and I guarantee he's going to be productive because as a power play weapon, he's unmatched.
I'm gonna go with Logan Mailloux as well. He was honestly, the biggest reason why is because, Matt, you're tweeting out OHL highlights nonstop, and every time you tweet out a highlight, because I know you do it for a bunch of prospects, but every time you were doing it, especially in the past few months, it just felt like it was always Logan Mailloux, and I'm like, going, my God, what does this guy have? 200 points in the OHL? What the hell's going on here? And it's just, he just seems like he's going to be, a really, really solid defenseman. And, like like you guys brought up, like that right side is not very, it's not exactly a shining spot. Reinbacher, he's a right-handed shot defenseman, so that's an option at 5 if the Canadiens wanted to take that. But what they have in the system right now in Justin Barron and Logan Mailloux looks really, really good. Very interested to see what Logan Mailloux could do. One name, probably not high on a lot of people's lists, but I'm just literally going based off of the one AHL playoff game I went to this year, which the Rockets scored 0 goals in. But he looked pretty good in that game for a team that didn't score any goals, which was Emil Heineman. This guy, wow, could he fly up and down the ice and carry the puck? I was really impressed with how he looked in that playoff game. I think they lost 4-0. It's hard to look good in a 4-0 game and hard to be visible and stand out. And he managed to do that. And I was just, I was really taken aback with how this guy could fly up and down the ice. But with not just pure raw speed, like controlled with the puck. He can move, and it's just he was all over the place in all the best ways possible. So definitely one guy who I am very, very interested to see come training camp. All right, we made it 35 minutes for a team that has not had news in God knows how long. More than 50% of the podcast was spent on them. I'm going to give myself
and we didn't even get
pat on the
any
back.
of the ridiculous trade propositions for Pierre-Luc Dubois.
Yeah, we didn't. We'll save that for another time. Where we trade the 5th overall pick and Cole Caufield for Pierre-Luc Dubois. No, but so let's talk a little bit about the news of what happened. Well, I'll ask you guys. Do you guys want to start? I have 2 things on the docket. Do you want to start with Florida or do you want to start with Toronto?
Let's talk about Toronto.
Yeah, let's talk about Toronto. I'm always good to dump on Toronto. All right. So Dubas obviously fired last week. I've been thinking a lot about it, been flip-flopping a lot about it. I'm just going to ask you guys straight up, like, is what happened to the Leafs Dubas's fault? Whoever wants to just jump in first.
I mean, he signed all the deals, and then obviously he had the assumption that the cap was going to go up. Cap didn't go up, and he stood pat. He stuck with his guys, and they couldn't win more than a round. Say what you will about Marc Bergevin, right? I was not his biggest fan when he was in Montreal, even with the success that he had, right? But he did have some playoff success, and he did that without superstars. He did that mostly without signing gigantic deals for his stars. He did sign a few. He signed one and then traded the guy away right before his no trade clause kicked in. So not to make a comparison between the two, but yeah, I think it is his fault. As much as, the Habs' lack of being able to get over the hump and really actually win a cup was Marc Bergevin's fault, because he didn't do enough to give the Habs scoring in front of Carey Price. He was sitting there relying on Carey Price to carry them as far as he possibly could until he broke. Right? It's the same thing for Dubas. He signed these big deals, expected the cap to go up, didn't adjust after the fact, didn't refuse to trade any of his major contracts that he signed. And as a result, they didn't have a team that was capable of doing more than one round. So I think it is his fault. But I will say this in his defense, Brendan Shanahan, I'm not sure why he's the guy who gets to pull the trigger on that move. I feel like he should have been, if Dubas is out the door, you're out the door too, because you were there even longer than him. So what did you do really to help change anything that was going to happen to the Leafs there? So yeah, I think he's to blame for it. But again, it strikes me as odd that Shanahan gets to pull that trigger.
2 good points, Matt, that you made. First, the point about the cap is really good because, COVID struck everything differently. And talking about Brendan Shanahan, I think is important because, yes, I think that it's Kyle Dubas' moves at the end of the day, but we're not sure exactly what Brendan Shanahan decided to do or not to do with that team. We heard that he could have nixed a few deals. So maybe, I don't know, that let's say that we learned that Dubas decided to bring that grit, that defenseman that they needed to go further along, and that Brendan Shanahan said no because he wanted to keep his 4 stars or something like that. So I'm not sure exactly which parts belongs to Brendan Shanahan. And let's say that Kyle Dubas was his 4th GM while he's president. So he's going to be with his 5th GM when he hires someone. It's really a lot of GMs for a guy to be there and just to win one round of playoff hockey. So I'm not exactly ready to throw everything to Kyle Dubas. I think he is a very good GM, but obviously he decided to make a lot of moves, and he was the GM, so he needs to be accountable for what he did.
Yeah, see, I love what you just said about Brendan Shanahan, because this is really like top down. And again, we don't analyze the Leafs, the way we analyze the Canadiens. So, I mean, I don't know how they're how they're run, who's in charge of what and what's going on there. But, Brendan Shanahan was the one. And now I'm not going to say that Lou Lamoriello was the right guy for this team with all the young players that were there. However, I will say this, that Brendan Shanahan this is, to quote a former colleague of mine at the radio station, which he tweeted it out. He said, listen, I think the inmates are running the prison in Toronto. Shanahan was the one who fired Lou in favor of Kyle Dubas, and they built this flashy team where I don't know. I never really felt, except for maybe a couple games against Tampa Bay this year, that they ever played like a team in the playoffs. It always felt like it was just if they won a game, it was one guy who just carried the load on his shoulders. And then, when the chips were down and they really needed to perform, they had no one to look to. So because it's just, I don't know if there's fighting in the locker room, but there was just like a lack of togetherness, and it shows with the way that they fold. So, the one thing I will say is that Dubas built a hell of a team on paper, but really the one thing that I will always knock him for, which was just his goaltending moves. Like, what the hell is going on there? Listen, Samsonov was good in the regular season, but that's going based off of record. Anyone in front of that team would have I would have had a good record. You guys would have had a good record in front of that team. So
I don't know about me, but I was a defenseman, so I would have stood out front of the net and probably been a liability out there, and then maybe Florida would have traded their first-round pick for me. The Ben Sherratt joke.
Well, there you go. But it's unbelievable. Just I don't know. I'm with you guys. Like, I think it's how does Shanahan just get away scot-free? I don't know, and I don't find a lot of people are talking about that.
The other one's Keefe, though, right? And I think that's part of the problem with Dubas is that he's stuck by Keefe. Keefe got out-coached in almost every single game of those playoffs. They got outplayed by Tampa, and a lot of that had to do with coaching. You saw some of the matchups that he was choosing with home ice advantage. Like, they won one game on home ice in those playoffs. Out of the 5 they won, one of them was on home ice. That's a problem. You have to be able to win at home in the playoffs. It's the whole reason that you play the regular season. What's the point of being so good in the regular season and getting home ice advantage and then ruining it by playing ridiculous, nonsensical matchups, right? He played right into John Cooper's hands, and he got lucky because his talent bailed him out, right? So that roster, those elite star players that Dubas was able to ink to big contracts, they did what they're supposed to do in that round. But it's unsustainable in the NHL playoffs. You have to be good enough to win those 16 games, right? And to win 16 games, you better win more than one at home through the first 2 rounds. I can't go and check the stats on it, but I would bet my entire bank account that no team has gotten through the playoffs winning only one game at home in the first 2 rounds and then won the cup. He got out-coached, and that also goes on Dubas's record because he's the guy who chose the coach. That was his guy. He stuck with him after he lost to Montreal in the first round and then lost to Tampa in the first round, stuck with him. So, I mean, it's kind of I hate to keep going back to the Habs as a comparison, but it's kind of the same thing with Bergevin, where he kept he got his coaches, and then when his coach didn't work out, he got another coach, and then at some point it's like, well, you've been hiring all these coaches and nothing's changing. We still have the same problem, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that also goes back to Dubas, but again, still it blows my mind that Shanahan is somehow just completely safe in all of this, because who put Dubas in his chair?
Yeah.
And it's interesting to talk about Sheldon Keefe, because I wonder how much Dubas defended him, because, he hired him when he was in the OHL in Sault Ste. Marie. He hired him when he was named GM of the Marlies when he was an assistant, and he named him with the Marlies. And then when Mike Babcock left, he named him in the NHL. So he's been hiring him 3 times, and I don't know if he hired another coach in his life. So maybe he really just wanted to stick by him, and Brendan Shanahan didn't want that. I don't know, but Sheldon Keefe is still there as we're talking. I guess his status will be evaluated with the new GM, but I'm pretty sure that the name Sheldon Keefe is a part of the problem when we talk about why Kyle Dubas doesn't have a job right now.
Yeah. I'm right there with you. It's, to me, the most telling thing was, there are all those gifs of when the Canadiens made their run of Bergevin dancing in his box. But guess what? You know what? GMs don't do much in the playoffs. Once the trade deadline passed, they ain't doing much, especially in the playoffs. He's basically a fan. So I could I could understand and agree. Kyle Dubas, celebrate your win after beating Tampa Bay in the first round. Good for you. But man, oh man, did those players and Sheldon Keefe celebrate like they won the freaking Stanley Cup after winning that first round. And to me, that was telltale sign, not for the series. I did not predict that Florida was going to win that series, but I said, man, oh man, are they going to get blown out in game one? They're going to get demolished because you cannot celebrate like that after, every year, 8 teams make it out of the first round per conference. Or what are you doing here? Or total 8 teams total. Like what are we doing? You look like a bunch of idiots, and the city is buzzing. We're ready, and it's kind of like everyone kind of assumed that betting wise, fans saying, "Oh, this is the year that Toronto's going to do it, and if they do it, they can go on a run." Well, that it kind of felt like the team kind of assumed that as well. It's like, oh, we made it out of the first round. Now we're going to go on a run. It's automatic. Oh, you got to work pretty damn hard to win another round in the playoffs, let alone win the Stanley Cup. So I don't know. When it happened, it didn't shock me that Florida beat them in. Well, it shocked me that they beat them in 5, but it didn't shock me that Florida won, but I didn't predict it. All right, let's move on to Florida. Those Florida Panthers. Okay, let's talk 2 things. One, okay, so they're up 3-0. If there was a team that could come back from a 3-0 deficit, it would be these Carolina Hurricanes. I feel like if you had to pick one of the two of Dallas, well, because Dallas just lost 4-0 for those of you who are watching along, or if it was Carolina, I feel like it would be Carolina. That if you put a gun to my head, the reason why I say that is because are the Florida Panthers, I don't know. I didn't see an injury update today, but all I know is that he left yesterday's game in the first period, didn't come back. Are the Panthers in trouble without Sasha Barkov?
I don't think they're in trouble without Barkov. I think he's still gonna play because he was there was a case that he could play tomorrow, and it's the playoffs, so I think he's gonna play. But if you tell me that Matthew Tkachuk is not gonna play or Sergei Bobrovsky is not gonna play, I have a different answer. But Barkov, I mean, he's a really good player. Don't get me wrong, but I think the way they're built right now, they're really playing as a team. So I think you could subtract an element from it, and they still could keep winning games. Aside, of course, as I said, Tkachuk and Bobrovsky, because right now they are the heart of that team.
Go on, Matt.
I think it's a problem that they don't have Barkov. He does so many things out there on the ice for them. He's really good defensively, but a 3-0 lead is tough to overcome. Maybe if the Hurricanes were 100% healthy, like if they had Max Pacioretty, I think their attack might become overwhelming at some point, and they might be able to go 4 straight. I think going 4 straight in the conference finals, it's a tall task for anybody. I agree with you. I think if I was going to pick anybody that had the ability to do it, it'd probably be those Carolina Hurricanes. But I just think it's going to be a little bit too much. I think Paul Maurice, the style of coaching that he does, he's going to be able to ratchet it down. He's going to be able to grind out like a 2-1 win or something in one of the next 2 games. And I think this is going to end in 5, just like it did against the Leafs.
So last thing, I think usually the Carolina Hurricanes, they could overcome that kind of adversity, but right now, have you seen the nonverbal of those guys? They look demolished because they just don't have a solution. So maybe you say that sentence 10 days ago, would say yes, the Hurricanes, they could do everything. Right now they look very, very weak mentally because they have absolutely no solution. So that's hard on a team too, when you know that everything that you're gonna try is not gonna work. You don't have the same attitude, and even if you really want, you're not as good.
Yeah. So that's a good point. It's funny because I had that exact same thought about Dallas tonight when I was watching them, because it's like they gave up 2 and then they came out flying, and then they give up a third. That was a very weak goal. They take Ottinger out of net, and then they really start to turn it on. They hit like 2 posts after Ottinger came out. And then I'm kind of thinking to myself, man, if Dallas gets one by, they're going to win this game. Obviously they didn't. But but then they just started taking penalty after penalty after penalty in this game. And I'm like, man, you're basically already down 3-0 in the series. Like, what are we doing here? You guys look like very fragile. Like, it wouldn't shock me if, Rod Bridgemore's a really, really good coach. I think he's great. I think like he could squeak out 1, maybe 2 wins. Whereas Dallas, like after this game, I'm like, wow, you guys are dead in the water. It would not shock me if Vegas came out and smacked you guys 6-0 in game 4 and swept you. And salut la visite, go golfing for the summer.
You got to be like wildly undisciplined to take that many penalties in a row in the playoffs, especially these playoffs where you've seen people getting away with some ridiculous things. And you take that many penalties, like not you're clearly just not even being close to careful if you're just doing these things right in front of the ref. You're getting called. Like these playoffs have been pretty. I'd say whistles for a lot of games have been kind of in the pocket. If you're taking those kinds of penalties, it's like, well, what does that say about your discipline? It's like if you're down in the series, you really got to ratchet that down. Make sure we're staying out of the box. We're going to do what we can to try and grind one out here.
Well, let's so that's a great segue. Missed penalties, none more so than last night. Everyone freaking out about what happened with Sam Bennett on Shane Gostisbehere. Wow. I couldn't believe that wasn't a penalty. Nobody could believe that was a penalty. It was just, I don't know. I don't like the idea of more video review, but this is where we're going to end off. Should more be reviewable? It's just, I mean, that's where we are, because every year we have this conversation. I know the cons. We don't want to make the games longer than they already are, but there are parameters you could set to make reviews. If you can't find something in 3 minutes, it's over. The review's done. Stop reviewing the play on if you can't overturn it in 3 minutes. Are we at that stage now with these egregious calls?
My only issue there is what do we mean? Do we mean reviews by player safety, or do we mean by the refs? Because if we're letting the refs review them, they can't even get goaltender interference correct. We have no idea right now. If I show you 2 different plays of goaltender interference and I said which one's a goal and which one's not a goal, you're going to pick wrong 50% of the time because it's a coin flip. So if we let those same refs start reviewing penalties, how often are they actually going to correct themselves? We've seen it a few times this year, actually. I've written articles on Eyes on the Prize about it when I see it happen, where the refs actually come together and then they correct a bad call that they made. But you see it very rarely. So I wonder if giving these refs, given that they already can't get goaltender interference correct, with the help of the War Room in Toronto, are they going to do any better with the penalties? My gut feeling says no. I would prefer if, the Department of Player Safety was just, doing their job properly and assessing the right suspensions that they should, which would ultimately correct the behavior. The easiest way to get players to start, acting the way that they should on the ice. If you take Sam Bennett aside and say, listen, you're going to be suspended for X amount of games, he's calculating in his head, I'm losing X amount of dollars. So eventually you do that over the course of time and he's going to go, well, I don't like not making that money. So I'm going to stop doing that thing that's making me not make that money. My concern with giving it to the refs and letting them do more reviews in game is, number one, as you mentioned, it's going to elongate the game because they take forever to actually do these things. And number two, they can't seem to actually review anything properly in the first place.
That's what I was gonna say. I mean, if you want to have those reviews at first, before having those reviews, you need to make the refs accountable, because you have no idea what kind of game you're gonna have if you're the players, and if you're the fans watching it, and you don't want the games to be longer, because that's really an issue in sports. I mean, every sports they're all trying to lower the games, so you cannot have those situations. I'm in favor of adding the truth, obviously, but not at the expense of having those long game and having all of those mistakes by the refs.
To me, the biggest thing is just like, I agree with you guys, and I hate introducing new rules because of like egregious things like this, because you think of offside. How did it start? Matt Duchene was like 15 feet offside in one play, and then all of a sudden, they're introducing offside review for a freak play that barely ever happens. And now we're calculating millimeters. And, if they were to introduce, but that's opening Pandora's box. They decided to do that. Now that we know the technology is there and it's available, it's even what's more frustrating, the delay in the game or knowing that the technology is there and they review a goal and they still allow it, but they see on the review that there was an egregious penalty that was missed. What's more frustrating at that point? That's a debate for another day, because we could be here, yelling at each other till we're blue in the face. But to me, that's where I stand on it at this point. It's like, common sense has to take over at some point. And if you introduced all these reviews, you got to make more things reviewable, because that last night was just ridiculous what happened and how that wasn't called a penalty on that high stick on Sam Bennett.
Yeah. Nuts. And look, you can make rule changes that make sense, right? And sometimes if they elongate the game a little bit, it's fine. The only question is, are you elongating the game in service of something that's not going to end up working? Like back in the day, a long time ago, when you had a minor penalty, the player used to stay in the box for the whole 2 minutes, no matter how many times he scored. They changed that rule because the Montreal Canadiens had a power play with Maurice Richard, Doug Harvey, Bernard Geffrion, and who else? Who else was on there? Jean Béliveau was on there as well. So they had some of the best players in the world on their power play, and they would score, 6 times in a 2-minute penalty. And the league said, well, you know what? These guys are too good. We're not going to allow that anymore. So once a team scores, this guy gets out of the box. And that made a heck of a lot of sense, right? And it worked. So the question that I have is, if you're going to make a rule change, sure, it might make sense, but it has to also work, right? You mentioned penalties that happen right before a goal, right? Again, I go back to goaltender interference. We don't know what goaltender interference is right now. So I wonder, are they going to know what the penalty is when they're looking at it? Or are they going to say, wow, you know what? That was incidental, and they're just going to make it up. Right. We've even heard them on some of their reviews for goals where they'll come back and they'll say, like, their reasoning for the call doesn't make any sense with what you actually saw on the ice. They'll say that I've seen them before where they say the call on the ice was no goal, but you can see on video the ref doing this. What are you talking about? You guys just made something up. We all have televisions. We can all see on the replay that you called it a goal. And now you're saying the call on the ice was no goal. So when you do these reviews, sometimes the refs, they seem to just invent whatever they want to see, and then they go out on the ice and they make a call, and everybody sitting at home is just scratching their heads going, well, what are you talking about? I just watched it, and that's not what happened. So again, big roundabout way for me to say I'm with you. Some changes make a lot of sense, but you have to make sure that it actually works in practice. And if it doesn't, then I'd say keep it the way it is and pray that George Peros and the DOPS can start actually punishing some of these illegal plays.
Yeah, that's a factor too, because if those suspensions are really not very long, and I don't know if you saw the Jamie Benn hit today. I mean, he's gonna end up with 1 or 2 games or something like that, and it's gonna start all over again in a few games. So if the players are not punished, they're just gonna continue to draw those hits, and we're gonna continue to have those conversations, and it's not gonna be any easier. So I don't know. I mean, the system is kind of broken right now.
It's and the $5,000 fines too, right?
Oh yeah,
if you fine an NHL player $5,000, that's like if any of us was driving, 190 kilometers down the highway, we get pulled over by the cops and they go, "Here's a $5 fine." We're gonna be like, "Okay, it's not gonna stop me from driving 190." I'll be like, "Cool, I'll pay that all day long because I'm getting to work faster."
Yeah, it's funny because Agnello called me at about 6:00 ish today. And we were just talking about the show and, the show throughout the summer and plans and whatnot. And he just says to me, he goes, "I don't know who the hell is running this league, but who the hell puts a draft on a Wednesday night in the middle of the week?" And I'm like, yeah, I kind of agree with you. Like, who the hell is running this league? Like, who's making these decisions? It kind of feels like they just do whatever they want. They've never made a smart decision ever. I mean, actually, I will give them kudos. They made one smart decision all playoffs, and it was on Sunday, putting the Dallas Stars and Vegas Golden Knights game 2 at 3:30 p.m. or 3 p.m. because there was a basketball game that everybody else would have been watching at night. You want eyes on your sport? Don't try to compete with another sport that is miles ahead of you in other ways. Anyways, we're just about out of time. That flew by, which is great because first time back in 3 weeks. I would say I did a bang up job. I didn't mess up. I didn't swear. It's all good.
And your banner didn't fall on your head. So
yeah, that's true. Eh? It didn't even move. Like normally this, okay, I don't know if you could see, but there's like a center fold here. There's like one of the folds. And it just, sometimes it'll just like V on me. Like not even, it'll just V forward, outwards. And it hit me in the head today as I was working. I was doing my job and it hit me in the head. And I was like, oh, I should call in sick for the rest of the day. That didn't even happen. So duct tape is in good shape. You hear that, Sammy and Yellow? You could hold off on getting me, another sign for a few more weeks or months, we'll call it. Anyways, guys, thank you very much for joining me on this Tuesday evening. Just before you go, just tell everyone where they could find your work, and we'll start with Shal.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Charles-Alexis. You can read danslescoulisses.com for all the Habs news, and you can listen to me at BPM Sport a few times a week, actually. So yes, and thank you for having me, Matt. Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure having you. Matt, send us off with where people can find your work.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at DrakeMT. Looking forward to making some GIFs and some MP4s of the Memorial Cup coming up soon. Very excited for that. Outside of that, you can find me at www.habseyesandtheprize.com. We've gone independent now. We're running our own show. So that means I get to swear all the time. No, I don't actually swear on the articles. But anyways, we're also on Spotify if you want to listen. If you don't want to look at my face while I'm ranting, you can go to, again, Eyes on the Prize. Montreal Canadiens podcast. We're on Spotify, Google Play, Apple, anywhere you get your podcasts, you can find us on there as well. Mostly working on draft coverage right now. But once the season starts, then we kick into gear with the Montreal Canadiens coverage. So, yeah.
Well, there you go. Thanks, guys, for joining. It's always very, very much appreciated. And have a great rest of your weeks.
Thank you very much.
All right, there you go. That is your Tuesday edition of the Sick Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. Tony will be back tomorrow. I'll be back on Friday. Until then, we'll see you next time.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Tony Marinaro on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts. The Sick Podcast is brought to you by Energy Transportation Group. Driven to be different. La Vida Tibi. Embrace your true nature.